You have a talk that's titled Choose Boring Technology. Is that right?
Yes, that is.
How do you personally define boring tech?
So the title is pithy and clickbaity and intended to inspire people to look at it, to be honest with you. But what I really mean is that there is a difference between things that just came out last week and old workhorses that have been around for many years. Things, the old workhorses, they are well understood. They're not perfect, and I think it's important to say that. It's like we're not trying to find solutions to things that are perfect, because that does not exist. Old workhorses are things that we understand what they can do, and more importantly than that, we understand what they cannot do, and we understand how they fail. Newer technology may be promising, but we don't know what those things are with newer technology. So that's essentially what I'm driving at, is that difference. There's more to the talk than that, though. So
the talk is based off of a blog post you did, right?
Yep.
And so what inspired you to initially put your thoughts down about it?
Yeah, so I worked at Etsy for close to 7 years, and I guess I was kind of like the proverbial frog in a boiling pot of water. Like this, the Etsy way of building things just kind of grew up around me, and I didn't really see it all together until I left. But I think it's writing down the system, the Etsy way of building things that we built. I was involved, but I think the two people who did the most to come up with this were Kellen Elliott McRae, who was the CTO of Etsy for a long time until recently, John Alspaugh, who is one of the chairs of Velocity and the CTO now. Those two people, like, this is really like an articulation of their way. I realized that there was a coherent narrative structure to it that could be written down, and that's what the post is.
What is your process for assessing a new technology?
So I think it's important to note that there's a process, and it would surprise you to learn how many teams and companies out there exist that don't have a process. The process is whatever the developer uses to build a thing. That's what it is. I think that is a really bad way to do it. I think that local decision making on that level necessarily builds a global whole that's less good. And so I think that since you're trying to build a global whole, this is a conversation that on some level you must be having as an organization. Although, I mean, there may be scales of organizations where this stops working. If you're Google or Facebook, you do you, I guess. but I mean,
not
I think,
universally applicable.
Right?
But
yeah. But
okay.
On some level, like the technology choices you make affect everyone at the company, and so it should be a conversation that happens as a company. The kinds of questions you should, once you figured out how to do that, the kinds of questions you should ask in these conversations are, what is the problem we're trying to solve? That's a really good first one to ask, because often the problem is, I want to use this new database that I heard about on Hacker News, and like that's not the kind of
I was going to ask you that.
That's not the kind of thing you should entertain. So that stops a lot of them.
Sure.
The other questions you should ask are, how would we solve this thing if we weren't adding a new piece of technology? That's a really instructive. That's a really illuminating question to ask, because it's pretty rare, if you have a reasonable set of building blocks, that the answer is it's impossible. So you can go through that process and say, well, we could do it, but it'd be really hard, and we should use this new thing because this is an insurmountably hard thing to do. Or pretty often what happens is you go through it and you say, oh, okay, it's not, I thought it was a novel problem, but it's not really. Let's just use our shared infrastructure. And then if you get through those gates, then the kinds of things you have to ask after that are, what's a way we can do this that's low risk? You shouldn't have a conversation that results in, okay, so we've decided we're going to rewrite the entire website in MongoDB. It's going to take a year, so we're stopping all work for a year while we do that. Like, that's not the kind of thing you want to be doing. You need to find low-risk ways to dip your toes in the water to gain confidence in your ability to operate a thing. And so those are the things you need to identify once you've decided to use a new technology, and one of the outputs of that could be that was a mistake and we should go back.
Right.
So you have to plan for the possibility of failure.
What are the main things, if there are, that lead you to reject a new technology? Is it that there isn't a direct intent or association with the broader needs of the organization?
That's a really big one, is that there's no, it's just, the rationale is what if we use ClojureScript, but that's a big one. But those other gates that that conversation structure that I outlined has numerous gates that the thing may not pass. And I think those are the places where you reject.
So the vast majority of them fall into that.
I think once you've got shared platforms accumulate economies of scale, right? And so it's a force multiplier for everybody to use the same stuff. People can switch between teams. There are all these other benefits you get from it. And in order to add a thing to it, once you have that, it really has to overcome all of that accumulated value. And that it's relatively rare for that to happen, but it does happen. And the other aspect of this is that as an organization gets bigger, you tend to have more resources to experiment, which you don't have as a younger company.
So the next question I have for you is more of a cultural question. When somebody is particularly revved up about a new technology to the point where they're almost becoming an evangelist for it, and you know that you don't want to use that, how do you, if you can, maintain their enthusiasm while shifting them into the direction that they need to go?
Yeah, so I think I was very much like that as a younger person. I was somebody who was a functional programming wonk. I was very interested in things like that. But I think I just thought that was what fulfilled me. I think that the degree to which developers really are fulfilled by using a specific thing as opposed to solving a problem that real people have is somewhat overstated. And I try to get people excited about shipping stuff, which is where I think real fulfillment comes from. I enjoy manipulating group theory monoids in Haskell, and I will not deny that it's fun when that intersects with a real goal.
Sure.
But it's relatively rare that that's really what the real goal is.
So keep the focus on the real goal as opposed to the implementation. Last question for you. What people or projects are you following these days?
Biggest one I can think of is my colleague at Stripe, Kyle Kingsbury, who is better known on the internet as Afer, who is doing an open source project which is sponsored by Stripe called Jepson, which the point of that is to map the territory between database marketing and how databases actually react in the real world. So if people producing database marketing or people doing database theory in academia are the theorists, then he's the person building the particle accelerator or possibly banging on the particle accelerator with a sledgehammer. And so I think he's doing one of the most amazing things in our area of tech right now, and everybody should pay attention to him.
Great. Well, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.